Joining us now to discuss is the president of Judicial Watch and author of A Republic Under Assault, Tom Fitton. Tom, thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Hey, you're welcome.
Wow, I just checked that petition. It's about 320,000 people right now. How did this come to be?
Well, I noticed the left uses this change.org petition site to push its agenda, and I thought it would be appropriate for Judicial Watch to say, hey, what about Joe Biden? Are we going to apply the basic standards of the rule of law and follow the rules that the Justice Department told us needed to be followed under the Trump administration to Joe Biden? They appointed a special counsel despite knowing that Donald Trump had done nothing wrong, and it was harassment. But the rules, they tell us, required them to appoint it because there might be a conflict of interest if they were going to do their harassment internally. Here, we've got evidence that Hunter Biden, A, is under criminal investigation, so there's no doubt about that. They've been sitting on that for 2 years. Secondly, though, the evidence is that his crimes may implicate his father. So no matter how you slice it, whether it be Hunter directly or the fact that his father and other family members of the Biden family are implicated, the Justice Department, following its own rules, has no choice but to appoint a special counsel. But evidently, the Justice Department is thoroughly corrupted, and they don't want to do what the law requires or their own regulations require. So the American people, at least through this process, can help remind them what their duties and responsibilities are.
That's right. We'll give them a more than gentle nudge, right? And by the way, I love that you're using this petition tactic, that you're borrowing some of the tactics of the left, because let's figure their tactics sometimes are very effective. We should never borrow their philosophy or their ethics, but at times, their tactics. And I want to ask you here, all the Hunter Biden stuff. I do think that sometimes, because his life is so full of corruption and many of the aspects of it are so salacious, sometimes it's tempting to get lost down that rabbit hole of how awful Hunter is. But Hunter has never been elected to anything. He is just a bag man for the Biden cartel. The reason he matters to us as citizens of the United States is because of the interaction with his father, which you mentioned. Was his father involved? He was certainly involved in some of these business deals. Was he involved in criminal activity? And I want to ask you, Tom, because you've studied these issues so deeply. I've asked this to lots of journalists. No one has been able to give me a decent answer. Is there any other logical person who could possibly be the, quote, big guy that Hunter Biden references as getting 10% of all his deals? Is there any other person that it could reasonably be besides Joe Biden?
No, and Joe Biden should be asked that question by law enforcement. That's the scandal here. The scandal is that Joe Biden hasn't been questioned by law enforcement about this. We have the email evidence. We have his former business partner making statements, and obviously he'd be willing to tell a grand jury, I suspect, that this is the case, that he was involved. And if it were just Hunter trading on his family name and Joe Biden couldn't do anything about it, that'd be one thing. But the evidence is that Joe Biden was involved. He allowed Hunter to use his office to gain income, to put it charitably, including from foreign governments indirectly or directly in the case of China in some respects. And that's something he's personally responsible for in light of the evidence that Hunter was paying Joe Biden's bills and giving him a portion of his income that he was gaining.
Well, Tom, Hunter looks like he's going to have a new source of income with his new profession as an artist. I want you to hear what White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki had to say about that.
A system has been established that allows for Hunter Biden to work in his profession within reasonable safeguards. Well, I think it would be challenging for an anonymous person who we don't know and Hunter Biden doesn't know to have influence.
So these paintings are going from anywhere from about $75,000 to $500,000 for a guy that's certainly not a Picasso. I can't imagine that it's any other reason than his ties to his father's fame as vice president, as president, his time in political office. I don't think Steve or I could fetch that kind of money for an piece of art that we put out there.
No, and just because you have White House lawyers improperly involved in blessing it doesn't make it any less a money laundering operation. My view, the Justice Department should be asking questions of the White House about this, and they should be monitoring this very closely. But, this is why we need at least some special counsel of some type. I don't want to overstate whether a special counsel is going to do anything, i.e. Special Counsel Durham. But the American people, and I'm shocked by the numbers here. I never thought it'd be 300,000 plus, 320,000. The American people want the rule of law applied here, and frankly, guys, Republicans here have little to zero interest in holding Joe Biden accountable. And I think voters and their supporters are tired of it. And I think both liberals and conservatives should be concerned that the Justice Department only prosecutes political opponents of those in power and protects those who they deem to be on their side. It's really a frightening prospect we face in terms of the rule of law here at the federal level.
No, I think there are parallel systems of justice. There are two sets of rules, and I think the American people intrinsically understand this. You mentioned that a lot of Republicans in Washington, D.C. are unwilling and just uninterested, quite frankly, in delving into this Biden corruption. When they look at the DOJ and how intrinsically corrupt it is, when they see the terrible way that they are treating January 6th defendants, some of whom committed very innocuous, non-violent crimes, and when you compare that to the lack of interest from the DOJ into somebody like Hunter Biden, who at the least committed a lot of FARA violations, foreign agent registration violations at the very least. Why aren't Hill Republicans, Tom, more interested in these cases? Why don't they show some backbone and some guts and try to hold the DOJ to the power? They act like they're bystanders who have no power over these agencies.
I've been asking questions like that for almost 25 years. I mean, there's nothing new under the sun in that regard. Voters need to let their representatives in Congress know, both Democrats and Republicans, that corruption's a big issue. When they run for office, we hear noise about corruption, and then they're in office, they forget about it, and they get more focused on tax cuts rather than making sure that crooks aren't at the table to discuss those tax cuts. If you want a compromised government or you want honest government, let's make sure crooks aren't at the table during policy discussions. And when Attorney General Garland here specifically needs to be held personally accountable. Why is it he's not following his own Justice Department's rules on special counsels for Joe Biden? Why is that?
Right.
We have evidence over the last month or so that Joe Biden has repeatedly lied about his connections to Hunter Biden's business, and there's been crickets out of the Justice Department. That's no surprise. But as we were saying, the crickets out of the Republicans is really inexcusable, and nor is it excusable for the Democrats, because look, I'm neither Republican or Democrat as president of Judicial Watch. I may have my personal predilections, but in matters of corruption, there ought not to be Democrats or Republicans, and we ought to hold each party to the same standard. Corrupt politicians should be held accountable. We shouldn't abuse the law to target your political enemies, but we should reassure the American people that when there's strong evidence of corruption, not dossiers, but emails, we follow up and make sure that there's a serious investigation.
Yeah, emails and bank wires, by the way. Bank wires from Chinese Communist Party-controlled entities of millions and millions of dollars directly into the coffers of Hunter Biden. So we don't have to guess. This is not some salacious dossier. This is real evidence. Tom Fitton, thank you for everything you do for our country, and thank you for being with us this evening.
You're welcome. I appreciate the time.